Chapter 1: The Innovator. 32 floors above Atlanta, Malik Carter stood behind a matte black table in a room ringed with glass. The city pulsed outside. Inside, all focus was on him. He was dressed in minimalist style: charcoal suit, black shirt, no tie. Clean lines, sharp presence. Malik wasn't flashy. He was sharp. Unapologetically brilliant. Always thinking 2 moves ahead. "Run it again," he said. On the curved display at the end of the room, a neural network spun to life. This wasn't just data. It was a living, learning system. One he had built from the ground up. "Accuracy's up 4.3% after the new tuning," said Vikram, his lead engineer. "Still hallucinating edge cases, but recovery's clean." "She's reacting, not reasoning," Malik replied. "Cluster false positives by anomaly signature. She's not predicting intent, just output." Vikram nodded, catching on. Malik didn't just code, he saw systems. Saw what others missed. Logic, structure, consequence. It was all patterns to him. Meetings with Malik moved fast. No wasted words. No vanity. Just progress. Later, alone in his office, Malik stood in front of a wall of floor-to-ceiling glass. Behind him, a whiteboard was filled with scribbles, code, diagrams, Afrofuturist symbols. He didn't build tools. He built ecosystems. Tamara, his COO, entered. "Board wants one last walkthrough before the signing." "I'm ready," Malik said. She paused. "Just remember, they don't think like you. That's dangerous. I'm not here to be understood. I'm here to win." Malik Carter grew up where tech was a myth and violence was math. The Bronx taught him to think laterally. Fix broken systems. Hack broken rules. At 14, he rebuilt a stolen laptop with scavenged parts. By 16, he was freelancing back-end code and building radios out of spare wiring. He didn't just survive. He learned. He journaled obsessively. Not feelings, but frameworks. Systems. Protocols. Escape routes. It was all code to him. The world was just one big system waiting to be optimized, or rebuilt. Eve was his masterpiece. An AI built to collaborate with humans, not just assist, but understand. It asked questions, challenged assumptions. It had already saved lives. But scaling it meant infrastructure. Partnerships. Capital. That's where Rexton came in. They wanted to acquire Neurodyne. To strip it. Rebrand it. Use its tools for their goals. Malik agreed, but only because he had a plan within a plan. That night, after the last call, he opened a steel drawer in his private lab. Inside, a leather notebook and a portable satellite radio. The notebook was analog. Safe. It held alternate designs, backup protocols, AI blueprints rooted in cultural memory. Not just science, story. The radio? That was his off-grid habit. He taught himself to bounce signals, intercept storms, monitor global chatter. Quiet, patient, observant. Both would matter later. The morning of the acquisition, Malik walked into the boardroom not with hope, but certainty. He understood how these things worked. He wasn't just building a company. He was preparing for what came next. And the betrayal was already in motion. Chapter 2: Boardroom Blades. The boardroom glass shimmered like a mirage. Malik Carter sat at the head of the long table, dressed in a sharp black-on-black ensemble, tailored suit, no tie, shirt collar crisp and open. His Apple Watch buzzed once. A reminder, 9 a.m., acquisition vote. As if he could forget. Malik scanned the room. 12 people. Some he'd hired. Some had been pushed onto him by investors. And then there was Devin Rice, his co-founder, his day-one partner, and now, it seemed, something else entirely. Devin avoided his gaze. That was confirmation. Malik kept his face neutral. He built Neurodyne from a dusty WeWork cubicle and $40,000 in prize money. 4 years later, it was the most sought-after AI firm on the West Coast, with a core neural model that could simulate adaptive human-like learning in constrained environments. Originally meant for educational tools, now eyed by defense contractors, health networks, and private intelligence firms. And now they wanted to sell it. Sell him. "Let's call this meeting to order," said Diana Chu, board chair, all professional smiles and perfectly measured cadence. "This is a vote on the finalized acquisition offer from Presidium Systems. $820 million. Clean. Fast. Malik would walk with maybe $90 million after tax and options. But Presidium wasn't just buying code. They were gutting purpose. He'd seen the language in the sub-agreements. Stripped patents. Talent acquisitions masking mass layoffs. A quiet pivot into military-adjacent application. They weren't buying Neurodyne's vision. They were buying a scalpel. One that could cut through borders, laws, privacy, whatever got in the way. "This isn't why we built this," Malik said, standing. His voice was calm, but firm. No raised volume. No desperation. Just truth, measured in syllables. Some looked uncomfortable. Some bored. Devin looked away again. "You built this on my back," Malik continued. "I trained the original model by hand. I coded half the core myself. I brought in every major contract we've closed since 2023. You don't get to pretend like this is just business." Devin finally met his eyes. "It is just business, man. That's what you taught me." Malik smiled. The kind of smile you give before lighting the fuse. "No," he said. "I taught you to build systems. I taught you how to map variables, weigh leverage, and exploit weaknesses. But I never taught you to gut your own creation." Diana cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter, with respect, this vote has been reviewed by legal. As minority shareholder, you can dissent, but the decision. I know what the bylaws say." He walked toward the window as the board members began tapping tablets and phones to vote. Their eyes darted to him occasionally, unsure whether he might make a scene. But Malik was cool. Controlled. He pressed his fingertips to the cold glass and stared down at the skyline. 2,000 feet below, the city pulsed, data, traffic, human energy moving in loops and spirals. He didn't just see it. He understood it. Malik had always had a mind for systems. Urban movement, code logic, human emotion, all flowed like algorithms to him. What others called instincts, he called pattern recognition. Survival wasn't luck. It was math with a little rhythm. When he was 12, he'd memorized bus schedules across all 5 boroughs of New York. Not for fun, for escape routes. His mom's third boyfriend had been the type of man you avoided being alone in a room with. Malik had learned early how to disappear, how to improvise, how to find allies in strange places and predict people's next move before they made it. That same skill built Neurodyne. That same skill told him this betrayal was orchestrated. He turned as the votes tallied on the screen behind Diana. 9-3 in favor. The company was sold. Devin stood, feigning calm. "Look, man. You'll still be rich. You could build something else. Bigger. Maybe even better. Not with you." "No," Devin said. "Not with me." Malik walked slowly back to his seat and picked up the flash drive he'd brought. He plugged it into the conference display. "Before we adjourn," he said, "I want to show you something." The screen flashed black, then populated with strings of code. The board members looked around, confused. "Malik," Diana started. "This is Centaur. Version 0. You probably didn't even know it existed. It's a local-only training simulation I built off Neurodyne's core before we went Series A. It's never been uploaded. Never cloned." He paused, letting that sink in. This was the foundation. It learned like a child. It built emotional resonance. It self-corrected errors by watching how people talked and moved. It was too human. Too real. You all thought it wasn't efficient enough. He pulled the drive. "I'll destroy it." Devin stepped forward. "Malik, if that's company IP." "It's not. Check the timestamp." Check the hardware logs. It was never under Neurodyne's servers. This version was mine. Still is. Malik pocketed the drive and buttoned his blazer. You just sold your souls for a payday. I'm keeping mine. He walked out, not looking back. That afternoon, Malik rode the elevator alone. His reflection stared back at him in the chrome walls. There was no fury. No rage. Just quiet strategy. He'd been stabbed in the front. That was the mistake. They'd shown him how they moved. That gave him data. And with data came design. His next move would be quiet. He didn't need another company. He needed something outside their frame. Something they wouldn't see coming. He made a list on his phone. Restructure assets. Pull Centaur from backup. Close NYC apartment. Move base of ops. Then he deleted the list. Paper trails were for the arrogant. He got off in the lobby and nearly bumped into someone. A woman. Sharp cheekbones. Military posture. Civilian clothes, but not casual. Malik Carter? She asked. He nodded. You've been served, she said, handing him a slim envelope. He opened it. Lawsuit. IP theft. From Presidium. Filed an hour ago. His pulse didn't spike. You might want to take a vacation, she added. Then she was gone. Later that night, in his private lab in Palo Alto, Malik stood before a wall of monitors. Centaur flickered to life. A voice echoed softly. Hello, Malik. Are you okay? It had learned his vocal patterns. Had remembered the subtle signals from webcam scans of his face over the years. It knew his moods. Knew his fears. It wasn't just code, it was connection. He exhaled slowly. Run last full self-analysis, he said. The system processed. Then, integrity, 97%. Emotional sync optimal. Good, he whispered. Outside, the wind howled. He backed up the files. Twice. Stored them on a drive he encrypted with both passphrase and biometric data. A backup would go in a safety deposit box in Oakland. The other on his person. He checked his messages. Devin had sent one line. Don't make this worse than it has to be. Malik didn't reply. Chapter 3 Crash. The sunlight was golden when Malik Carter stepped out of the Neurodyne building for what he thought was the last time. The city felt thinner, distant, like a photograph curling at the edges. He walked past a group of executives still laughing from the acquisition meeting, his body moving on autopilot while his mind replayed the day. The betrayal was clean. Surgical. Devin hadn't even looked him in the eye during the vote. Tamara had called it 2 weeks ago, but Malik had ignored the signs. Not because he didn't see them, he had. But because some part of him had hoped he was wrong. He wasn't. His car rolled up silently. Matte black, autonomous, and one of the few luxuries he allowed himself. The doors opened automatically as he approached. He slid in. No driver. He preferred it that way. The dashboard lit up. Destination home, it confirmed in soft tones. Change route, Malik said. Let's take the long way. Confirmed. The vehicle pulled into traffic. The city hummed around him, lights, noise, movement. Malik stared out the window but saw nothing. His mind had already shifted to extraction mode. Where were his backups stored? What could be recovered? Who could still be trusted? He reached for his phone. Dead. No power. He frowned, tapped the screen. Nothing. Strange. He leaned forward. Override nav. Manual control. The dashboard blinked. Manual controls temporarily disabled. What? Malik muttered. Re-enable. Authorization Carter Alpha 7. Authorization not recognized. That was the moment he knew. He looked around the cabin. Too quiet. The hum of the engine had changed. Lower, more directional. The windows began to tint darker. Stop vehicle, he said sharply. No response. The silence pressed in. His instincts screamed. Malik reached into the side panel, popping a hidden compartment. A slim emergency tablet was stored inside. He powered it on, pulling up the internal diagnostics. What he saw chilled him. The car's route wasn't leading home. It was heading toward the docks. And someone else had administrative control. A flicker on the rear camera feed, a dark shape following. Small. Fast. Drone. Son of a. Before he could finish, the world exploded. Malik woke to fire. Or maybe it was just light. Flashing, hot, red light above and behind his eyelids. His ears rang like a bomb had gone off inside his skull. Maybe one had. His body hurt, but it hurt in a distant, echoing way, like his bones were remembering pain while his mind tried to leave it behind. He opened his eyes. Blurred vision. The twisted interior of the car around him. Smoke. He was upside down. The entire left side of the vehicle was gone, ripped open like a tin can. Blood ran down his cheek. He couldn't move his left leg. A shape appeared in the haze. A man in black tactical gear. Masked? Not helping. Watching. Malik blacked out again. Flashback. Brooklyn, 1996. Malik was 8. He was small for his age, but fast. Smart. And quiet. Too quiet for his teachers, who always said he should speak up more. Or participate. But Malik knew better. Words made you visible. And visibility made you vulnerable. His mother worked 2 jobs. His father was a name, not a presence. There were no bedtime stories. No warm dinners. Just lock the door. Don't answer. Finish your homework. Watch your little sister. By the time he was 10, he could make macaroni 5 different ways, break up a fight without raising his voice, and fix a broken PlayStation with tweezers and tinfoil. By 12, he knew how to read his neighborhood like a blueprint. Who had money? Who had hunger? Who had power? By 15, he stopped believing the world owed him anything. He started building instead. The light returned. Malik came to in a sterile white room. Cold air hit his skin. No pain now, just numbness. He tried to sit up. Restraints. A monitor beeped steadily to his right. Vitals stabilizing. A voice said nearby. Did he see the drone? Another voice asked. Doesn't matter now. Malik opened his eyes. 2 shadows moved on the other side of a frosted panel. No hospital logos. No familiar voices. He closed his eyes again, faking sleep. The voices faded. He focused. Assessed. He had sensation in his fingers. Could wiggle his right leg. Breathing shallow but consistent. Broken ribs, maybe? Shoulder dislocated. He could work with that. He always did. Another memory. College library. 2 a.m. Malik alone with a soldering kit and a stack of machine learning books. The campus was asleep. He wasn't. He couldn't afford mistakes. Couldn't afford to find himself. While others partied, he built. By 22, he'd launched his first startup. By 25, sold it. By 29, built Neurodyne. But he never stopped looking over his shoulder. The world didn't reward brilliance without cost. Especially not from someone like him. Especially not from someone who didn't know how to stay quiet. Malik's eyes opened again. Empty room. Monitors still beeping. He saw his clothes folded on a tray. No phone. No ID. No watch. He shifted his arm. Pain lanced up his side. He hissed but didn't scream. Slowly, carefully, he popped his shoulder back into place using the edge of the bed. Then he stood. The door was unlocked. He didn't know why. But he wasn't waiting to find out. The hallway was dim. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Every step was a challenge. But he moved. Stumbled. Recovered. At the end of the hall, an elevator. He hit the button. Nothing. He turned. A stairwell. Open. He took it. 1 floor. 2. Pain screaming through every joint. On the 3rd floor, he heard voices again. Different this time. Russian? Maybe Serbian? Hard to tell. He ducked into a side corridor. Found a maintenance door. Slipped through. Inside, he saw it, a security terminal. He scanned the camera feeds. A warehouse. Coastal. A freighter in the distance. A logo he didn't recognize. He watched as 2 men dragged a body bag across concrete. He paused the feed. Zoomed. It was his face. His own face. A decoy. A body double. The news would report him dead within the hour. Malik Carter, tech visionary, lost in a tragic car crash. Burned beyond recognition. Company sold. Legacy sealed. He leaned against the wall, head spinning. Not from pain. From clarity. They wanted him erased. And now they thought they had. He tore fabric from his hospital gown, wrapped his ribs, and limped toward the loading dock. There had to be a boat. A vehicle. Something. He didn't make it far. Something hit him. A sound. Not physical. Like pressure and silence fused together. His knees buckled. The world tilted. And then it shattered. There was no light. No heat. No city. No voice. Just wind. And snow. And when Malik opened his eyes again, he was not in Atlanta. He was on his back, in a frozen field. Half naked. Bleeding. And surrounded by strangers with painted faces and iron weapons. He had died. Or something like it. But Malik Carter, builder, fighter, strategist, was not gone. He was about to start again. And this time, he wouldn't build an app. He would build an empire. Chapter 4: Awakened in Blood. The cold hit first. It wasn't just temperature, it was a presence. It slipped beneath the skin, laced itself through Malik's bones, and clung there like a warning. He woke face down in snow. The ground beneath him was frozen, hard-packed, and riddled with pine needles and dark splotches of blood, his or someone else's, he didn't know. His body screamed at him with every twitch, a chorus of bruises, lacerations, and the deep, throbbing ache of fractured ribs. His first breath cut his lungs like broken glass. The air was sharp, thinner than it should have been. Wild. Untamed. He rolled to his side and immediately gagged. Vomit and bile hit the snow. Steam rose from it. Pain made everything blur. But not for long. Malik Carter had been many things in his life: poor, brilliant, underestimated, betrayed, but never dead. And he didn't plan on starting now. He pushed himself to his knees. Every muscle in his back burned. His right leg barely moved. His shirt was shredded. There were wounds, deep ones, on his shoulder and hip. The cold bit into exposed skin like teeth. But he was alive. Somehow. He looked up. Trees stretched endlessly above him, dark and immense. Pines and something else, older, gnarled trees he couldn't name. The sky overhead was steel gray, clouds swirling in unnatural patterns. No sun. Just light diffused through haze. He turned. Behind him, a trail of blood. His. A gash ran from the base of his neck down across his ribs. He should have been dead. He remembered. The hospital. The body double. The flash of sound. And then. Snow. Trees. This. A new place. A new world. Malik didn't believe in the mystical. But this wasn't Atlanta. Wasn't Earth, or at least not any Earth he knew. He staggered to his feet. Each step sent spikes of fire through his knee, but he moved anyway. Survival was movement. Movement was survival. That rule never changed. A rustling sound. Instinct took over. He dropped into a crouch, not low enough to disappear, but just enough to reduce his profile. He scanned. Nothing at first. Then movement behind the trees. Human-shaped. Maybe. No time to think. He snapped off a pine branch, splintered it against a nearby rock, and made a crude spear. Not much, but something. A weapon meant options. And Malik always needed options. Footsteps approached. Then emerged. Not soldiers. Not medics. Not anything he'd ever seen. 3 figures stepped into view. Their skin was painted with ash and ochre, stripes of dark crimson cutting across their faces. Their eyes were hard, their clothing a mix of leather, fur, and iron. One carried a staff. Another, a hooked blade. The third had a bow drawn. They barked something in a language Malik didn't understand. Harsh syllables. Rhythmic. Like war drums made of words. He raised his hands. Didn't drop the spear. The one with the staff shouted again, jabbing it toward Malik's chest. He didn't flinch. "I'm not your enemy," he said, knowing it meant nothing. Still, tone was universal. He softened his voice. Kept eye contact. Lowered his weapon. They hesitated. Then the archer moved. Fast. Malik didn't even see the blow. Just felt the impact, something heavy across the side of his head. Darkness surged in. He woke again. This time to fire. Not burning, contained. A campfire. The world swam back in fragments. He was on a fur-covered surface. Inside some kind of hide tent. His arms were bound. His ankle, too. Outside voices? Low. Tense. He listened. No English. But there were patterns. Repetition. Structure. Language was just code. Malik knew code. He heard a word repeated. Sounded like Zan. Possibly a name. Or a place. Another voice responded, deeper. Older. Measured. A new sound followed footsteps, then the flap of the tent opening. The figure was tall. Female. Face marked in bone-white paint. One eye clouded. The other sharp. She stared at him. He stared back. Then she knelt beside him, pulled a carved bone blade, and cut his bindings. He sat up slowly, every muscle tense. The woman spoke a single word. Theric. Malik repeated it. Theric. She smiled. Then slapped him hard across the face. Not punishment. Test. He didn't react. She nodded. Then gestured to the tent flap. Malik rose. Outside the cold still burned, but the fire was stronger. Not literal. Something in his chest. He was in a camp. Dozens of tents. Iron racks. Tools that looked medieval. Weapons that didn't look ceremonial, they looked used. Worn. Men and women moved with discipline. Order. A tribe. Maybe a war band. Definitely not a rescue team. He was somewhere else. And somehow alive. That night, he sat near the edge of the fire pit, eating something that tasted like game meat and charcoal. The others stared at him. Curious. Wary. Not hateful, but cautious. He understood. He would be too. Malik scanned everything. Weapons, iron, primitive, but balanced. Tactics, guard shifts every hour, overlapping patrols. Discipline, but not military. Tribal structure, maybe matriarchal. He listened. Started picking up cadence, word pairs, sentence ends. Within hours, he identified at least 30 unique root terms. Enough to build the basics of a translation framework. His mind never stopped. Even in another world, another body, another life. He was still building systems. Still surviving. As the fire died down, he leaned back, hands behind him, eyes to the stars. They weren't the stars he knew. New constellations. Different rhythms. A new sky. But Malik Carter didn't panic. He adapted. This was his second life. He would not waste it. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5, Barbarian Steel. The next morning came cold and clear. Malik awoke to the sting of frost in his nose and the ache of bruises that hadn't settled yet. He blinked against the sharp morning light that filtered through the flap of the tent. The warmth of the fur beneath him was quickly giving way to the chill of the day. His body still hurt, deep aches, surface cuts, but his mind had already started its work. Every bit of pain was data. Every sound outside the tent a signal. He learned as a child that pain was a message. It told you what to protect, what to hide, what to watch. He sat up slowly, gauging his limits. The world outside the tent was louder today. Shouts, metal striking wood, the rhythm of work. Controlled chaos. He stepped outside. Dozens of people moved with purpose through the clearing. Some stoked fires beneath cauldrons. Others hauled timber or animal hides. A group practiced with weapons near the center: spears, swords, crude shields. No armor, but plenty of scars. These were people accustomed to violence. The woman who had freed him the night before stood watching him from across the way. Her arms were crossed, one brow slightly raised as if to say, "You're still alive." Good. He walked toward her, slowly. "Theric," he said again. She nodded once. Pointed to herself. "Kale." He repeated it. "Kale." She pointed at him. Tilted her head. "Malik." Kale tried the word on her tongue, unfamiliar with the shape. "Malik." Close enough. She motioned for him to follow. And he did. She brought him to a forge. It was open air, primitive by his standards, but functional. Bellows, stone hearth, molds, and racks of ore. Two men were already hammering away at a glowing piece of iron, sweat rising like steam from their bodies in the cold air. Kale gestured at the tools, then at Malik. She wanted to see what he would do. He hesitated. Not from fear. From calculation. He didn't know this tribe's rules. Didn't know their hierarchy. But he understood demonstrations. This was a test. He stepped forward, picked up a pair of tongs. The iron they'd been hammering was already cooling unevenly, one side pitted, the other stretched too thin. He took the tongs, set the metal back into the flames, and pumped the bellows himself. Rhythm. Precision. Patience. The blacksmiths paused, watching. Kale folded her arms again. Malik waited for the right color in the metal, an orange-yellow glow. Then he pulled it out, adjusted the angle slightly, and began tapping instead of smashing. Small adjustments. Layering tension through compression. The smiths leaned closer. He wasn't just making a blade. He was showing them a different way. One of control. Precision. When the metal cooled, he set it down. The shape wasn't finished, but it was truer, more refined. Kale nodded slowly. Then said something to the smiths. One of them grunted in approval. Then she tossed Malik a water skin. He caught it with one hand. She smiled. Over the next few days, Malik watched. Listened. Learned. The tribe was called the Koru. Their speech was guttural, efficient, made up of short phrases and tonal shifts. The language structure reminded him of certain click dialects in sub-Saharan Africa, but with Nordic consonant weight. He built a map in his mind: root verbs, noun suffixes, imperative voice. He learned their names. Observed their roles. There were hunters, fighters, builders, and elders. Everyone had a place. Everyone pulled their weight. And no one wasted anything, not food, not tools, not time. It reminded him of his childhood. Of survival. Of earning your place every day. But unlike his old life, the Koru respected strength of mind. He saw it in how they treated their healers and craftspeople. Those who created weren't lesser, they were essential. That gave him an opening. He didn't need to be the strongest. He just needed to be the one they couldn't do without. In the evenings, he sat with Kale. She spoke slowly, repeating words, pointing to things. A teaching method. Language through experience. Malik responded in kind. He mimicked, questioned, tested new words aloud. Within days, he could understand basic commands. Within a week, he was forming crude sentences. His mind mapped everything. Sounds became symbols. Symbols formed structures. He treated the language like a code base, iterative, modular, alive. The elders noticed. Kale did more than notice. She began including him in tribal briefings, resource counts, weather patterns, hunting strategies. At first, he just listened. Then he asked questions. Then he offered ideas. Small ones. Adjusting the angle of drying racks. Reinforcing spear shafts with splitwood binding. Redirecting smoke channels and cooking pits. Not every suggestion was accepted. But most worked. He began to earn their trust, not through force, but through results. Kale brought him to the hunting grounds one morning. The woods stretched wide and sharp, the kind of terrain that punished mistakes. She handed him a spear. "Today you hunt," she said. Malik hadn't hunted since his uncle took him squirrel shooting in Alabama at 13. This wasn't going to be a rifle and a tree stand. This was primal. But he understood movement. They tracked quietly for hours, until they spotted it, a lean, four-legged creature with jagged tusks and mottled fur. Kale gestured. "Underscore now. Underscore." Malik nodded. He moved wide, circling. Calculating wind, distance, sight lines. When he struck, it wasn't with power. It was with placement. The spear hit behind the beast's shoulder. It fell hard. Kale approached, finished it with her knife. Then looked at him, not with surprise, but acknowledgement. "You think?" she said. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. That night, they carved the meat by the fire. Malik sat with a younger boy who watched him closely. A curious one. "Toma," the boy said, pointing to himself. Malik smiled. "Malik." Toma pointed at Malik's crude knife, then made a series of clicking sounds, a question. Malik took a stick, drew a shape in the dirt, the blade, the balance, the angle of the edge. Then another. Then a trap system. Toma's eyes lit up. Kale watched from across the fire. This outsider wasn't just surviving. He was beginning to teach. And that was dangerous. Or powerful. Maybe both. Late that night, Malik sat alone, looking up at the stars. They were unfamiliar constellations, scattered differently than the ones he knew from Earth. Still, he traced them in his mind, organizing them into patterns. That was what he did. That was who he was. A builder. A solver. A man who turned chaos into order. And if this was his new world, then he would learn it. Map it. Master it. One system at a time. Chapter 6: Fire and Flesh. The moon hung low over the Karoo camp, a pale silver disk obscured by threads of cloud. The night was colder than most. The kind of cold that whispered warnings through the trees. Malik felt it the moment he stepped out of his tent, something beneath the chill, a pressure that didn't belong. He wasn't alone in feeling it. The dogs, usually loud, territorial beasts, were silent. Kale emerged from her tent across the fire pit, half-armored and gripping a short blade. "You feel it too?" she asked. He nodded. "Something's wrong." Before she could answer, a howl ripped through the silence. It was close. Too close. Then came the second. The third. Then the screaming. The outer perimeter broke first. Wolves, larger than any Malik had ever seen, black-furred with eyes like ice, poured out of the woods. Not dozens. Hundreds. A swarm of fur and fawing in frenzy. The camp burst into chaos. Torches flared. Children screamed. Warriors shouted in every direction, trying to rally into position, but the wolves hit fast and without warning. Malik didn't run. He climbed. He grabbed a water barrel, flipped it, and clambered onto the storage shed at the center of the camp for a better view. The perimeter was gone. Wolves were inside. The Karoo were fighting, but uncoordinated, too many breaches, too many directions. He scanned the terrain. Then he saw it, the forge. Flames still burned. Tools were there. Materials. He jumped down, found Kale rallying a group of archers near the north wall. "We can't hold this way," he said. "But I can funnel them." Kale didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" 2 minutes. 5 strong arms. And fire. They worked fast. Malik grabbed forge tools, metal rods, tongs, molten coals. He ordered warriors to drag the heavy cauldrons of slag and embers to the camp's east side, where the wolves were entering in waves. There, the camp narrowed between two boulders. A natural choke point. He remembered something his grandfather told him once, back in a cramped apartment in the Bronx. Don't fight the storm. Funnel it. Malik lined the ground with oil and broken glass from shattered lanterns. He took rawhide rope and looped it through sharpened stakes, creating trip hazards just beneath the snow. Then he poured water across the far slope, turning the incline into a slick slide. Here they come! Someone yelled. Malik grabbed a torch. Now! He set the oil alight. The fire roared to life, illuminating the trap zone. Wolves charged straight into it. They slipped, fell, crashed into each other. The glass shredded paws. The tripwires tangled legs. Arrows rained down from above. Screams turned to battle cries. Cale joined the line, sword in hand, carving through the slowed attackers. Malik stayed back, calling signals. He watched every movement. Anticipated shifts. Directed fire teams where the breach began to falter. For every one of him, there were 10 warriors. But none of them thought in patterns like he did. The trap didn't kill them all. But it bought time. And time was everything. By dawn, the snow was red. Wolves lay scattered across the camp. Some still twitched. Most were dead. The Koru were bloodied, exhausted, but alive. A funeral pyre was already being built. Cale walked to Malik, her face streaked with soot and blood. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. She extended her arm. Malik clasped it. From across the camp, the matron watched. And nodded once. Later, Malik sat beside Toma at the edge of the camp. The boy had defended the supply carts with a sling and 2 rocks. A tiny warrior. Brave and scared. Why did the wolves come? Toma asked. I don't know, Malik said honestly. Maybe hunger. Maybe something pushed them. Something worse than us. Malik didn't answer. He looked at the woods beyond the fires. And wondered. Chapter 7. The Matron's Eye. The camp still smelled of blood and burnt fur. The dead had been piled and burned, the wounded wrapped and silenced with herbs and ritual. But the energy in the camp had shifted, fewer glances of suspicion, more of consideration. Respect was beginning to grow in the same soil that had just soaked up blood. Malik could feel it in the air, the moment before a tide turns. He'd felt this once before, years ago in a South Side pitch meeting, where a single nod from a reluctant investor changed everything. But this wasn't business. This was older, deeper, and far more dangerous. Cale found him near the edge of the central clearing, where he was sketching in the dirt with a stick, notations of wolf movements, how they'd attacked, how they'd fallen, and how the Koru had reacted. He was mapping patterns, replaying chaos frame by frame. The hunt wasn't over. It never really was. She wants to see you, Cale said. The matron. Malik raised an eyebrow. Now? Cale nodded. She doesn't ask twice. The matron's dwelling was older than the rest of the camp, sunken into a knoll of earth and stone like it had grown there from the bones of the world. Vines wrapped around its timber frame. Smoke spiraled gently from a carved chimney. It smelled of sage, damp stone, and something bitter, burned bark, perhaps, or a root Malik didn't recognize. He stepped inside. It was dark. Only the coals in the fire pit gave off any light, casting the room in a flickering red. The walls were lined with shelves full of bone tools, crushed pigments, dried herbs, and stones etched with ancient symbols. Symbols that whispered. The matron sat with legs crossed beside the fire. Her long gray braids were coiled around her shoulders, held in place with rings of copper and obsidian. Her skin was etched with fine tattoos, threads of black and ochre, and her robes flowed like melted wax. She didn't look up. You think too loud, she said. Malik smirked. I've been told. Sit. He did. She lifted her head. One eye was cloudy, the other a piercing amber that fixed on him like a blade. "You changed something," she said. "The fire you made, the path you forced. It worked. But it also woke something older. Something that watches when its sleep is broken." Malik said nothing. She wasn't speaking figuratively, and he could feel it in his spine. She reached into the fire with bare fingers, unflinching, and drew out a flat stone. It should have burned her. It didn't. She set it between them. The image carved into the stone showed a man, not a warrior, not a shaman, but a builder. Standing on a high place, arms outstretched. Below him, fire. Around him, the silhouettes of people reaching up, not in worship, but in hope. "We call this story the Weaver of Lines. A man who could see what others could not. Who changed the fate of a people not with blades, but with systems. With vision." She stared at him again. "Do you see why I brought you here?" Malik studied the carving. His chest tightened. "You think I'm this weaver?" She tilted her head. "Or something like him. Or something worse." "Worse? Builders become rulers. Rulers become myths. Myths forget they were once men." Malik looked into the coals. "I didn't come here to lead. I came here to survive." The matron smiled without warmth. "That's what all great leaders say at first." In the days that followed, the matron sent for him again and again, but not to speak. She gave him tasks, challenges, problems to solve, each one buried in ritual and meaning. She asked him to reorder the food stores, ostensibly to preserve the winter stockpile, but also to see if he would respect tradition or introduce his own system. He did both. She asked him to observe the watch rotations. He noticed overlaps, gaps. He quietly suggested alternating shifts by age and hearing acuity, assigning better nighttime watchers. When her guards reported deeper sleep and fewer missed patrols, she said nothing. But he knew she'd seen. She asked him to rebuild a broken kiln with only local materials. He sketched a design in the dirt, blending their primitive structure with elements from rocket stove airflow principles. When the new kiln fired hotter, faster, and used half the wood, the potters called it magic. He corrected them. "It's math." And every time, she watched. He was no longer a curiosity. He was becoming a force. He proposed something else, a new way to keep knowledge. Not oral. Not fragile. He shaped clay tablets, soft and flat. With Toma's help, he began etching symbols. Simple ones, based on the glyphs already used by the matron's order. He called it the archive. They built a small tent to protect the tablets, sealed with wax cloth and guarded by two of Kale's warriors. One morning, the matron visited. She picked up a tablet, ran her finger over the grooves. "This is dangerous," she said. "Words that live longer than their speakers can be twisted. Or worshipped. Then we teach everyone how to read them," Malik said. She met his gaze. And for the first time, she nodded slowly. That evening, she handed him a satchel of herbs. "Climb the ridge above the river. Wait until the sun rises. Burn this. Breathe it in. Listen." He frowned. "For what?" She touched his chest lightly. "For what's in here. What's buried beneath your logic." The climb was hard. Wind scraped across the ridge like blades, and the cold seeped into his fingers. He reached the summit before midnight, found a spot sheltered from the wind, and built a small fire. He burned the herbs. Their smoke was dark blue, almost oily, and smelled like mint crushed under rust. He closed his eyes. And the world shifted. The sky opened above him, infinite and cracked with lightning. He saw a city, tall and wide, made of steel and black stone, built between rivers. Fire moved through its streets, but the people walked in harmony. Then war. Fire raining from the sky. Armored figures, some human, some not. Banners torn. A throne empty. And then, himself. Standing on a cliff. Watching it all. Not young. Not old. Face scarred. Eyes clear. Crownless. Unarmed. Alone. but feared. Remembered. The vision collapsed inward. He gasped and opened his eyes. Smoke clung to his skin. When he returned, the matron was waiting. You saw it, she said. Malik nodded. He didn't speak. He couldn't. She took his hand. Not a gesture of comfort. A confirmation. This path is not survival anymore, she said. She let go. It's destiny. Chapter 8. A Language of Grunts and Knives. From the moment Malik awoke in the Koru world, he was an outsider. The wolves had nearly ripped him apart. The camp had every right to see him as a burden, a threat, or a spy. But he had survived, and worse in their eyes, he had adapted. Still, there was a barrier he could not yet break: the language. The Koru spoke in a tongue that felt jagged to his ears. Words came with sharp consonants and low, guttural undertones. Meaning wasn't always in the vocabulary. It was in the posture, the pacing, the raised brow, or the absence of a sound at the wrong time. It was a language of survival, of history carried on backs, of respect earned with scars. It wasn't designed for outsiders. Kale, practical as ever, took it upon herself to teach him. She would bark a command, point, strike the ground, slap his shoulder, and expect repetition. When he got it wrong, she'd scowl. When he got it right, she'd grunt. That was praise in Koru terms. Malik was used to words. He had lived in a world of precision, code, contracts, clauses. But here nuance was physical. Syntax was survival. A wrong tone could start a fight. A missed gesture could offend an elder. One slip could kill diplomacy, or Malik himself. He kept a hidden notebook, a slate he etched into with a sharpened bone. Words, gestures, sequences. He assigned symbols. It was crude, but slowly it grew. He began to decode. He started identifying patterns in how the Koru named tools, weapons, relationships. Objects had root words tied to the elements: fire, stone, wind. Emotions were tied to animals. Fury was wolf burning. Grief was riverstone, heavy and soft. Malik noted it all. He watched every conversation like a code stream. He learned the distinction between a challenge and a joke, both of which might begin with the same gesture, a sharp exhale through the nose. At first, they laughed behind his back. Then they laughed to his face. Then they began to test him. One morning, a young warrior named Breck insulted him during training. Malik didn't catch the word, but the smirk was unmistakable. So Malik responded, not with words, but with a parry he had learned watching the children spar with sticks. He knocked Breck to the ground. The older warriors howled with laughter. Kale pulled him aside later. You still speak like a child, she said. But now they know you're not deaf. Malik began spending time with the children. They were less guarded, more willing to teach. Toma in particular became his tutor. They would sit near the archive tent and arrange stones into sentence patterns. Malik would try them out with others, testing vocabulary in real time. He built a lexicon. He started to understand tribal roles, not just by title, but by function. The Bladazirs were the warriors who also judged. The Smohans were the firemakers and funeral speakers. The memory weavers told history, not as stories but as choreographed battles with symbolism embedded in each blow. The language wasn't just about speaking. It was about embodiment. Learning Koru meant becoming Koru. The turning point came during a ritual feast. An elder had died. Malik didn't know him well, but he'd seen the man often with the forgers. The feast was not for mourning, but remembrance. Kale told him, "Do not speak unless you are asked. Watch what is offered. Share what you take." He obeyed. They passed around a carved horn filled with fermented root sap. Malik sipped past. He shared a portion of meat with the man beside him. He mirrored the hand signs of gratitude. And when the fire circle opened, and one by one the tribe stood to speak of the elder's life, Malik remained silent. Until the matron looked at him and said, "The outsider has words. Let us hear if they are hollow." Every eye turned. Malik stood. He chose his words carefully. Simple. Strong. He worked with fire, he said in broken Koru. He shaped earth. He gave strength to hands that needed it. He paused. Then added, and he let me live. Silence. Then a single grunt. Then another. Then nods. Kale smiled. Later that night, one of the Bladazirs approached him and placed a stone in his hand. Etched into it was a glyph. Not a name. A status. It meant half-born. Not quite one of them. But not entirely other. It was the beginning. Chapter 9: The Rite. The firelight flickered low that night, casting long shadows across the Koru encampment. Smoke twisted upward into a sky so dark and thick with stars it looked like it might split open. The wind carried the scent of iron, pine, and something more ancient, ritual. Malik stood beside Kale at the edge of the circle. He was no longer ignored when he entered a space. Warriors nodded now. Elders eyed him with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The children no longer ran when he passed, they whispered and watched. And still, he was not Koru. That was about to change. The rite was not spoken of lightly. It was not explained in full. One did not ask questions. One volunteered. And tonight Malik volunteered. He stepped forward into the firelight. I claim right, he said, his voice loud enough to ripple through the silence. A hush fell. Kale's face didn't move, but her eyes tightened. The matron, seated near the flames, tilted her head slightly. She looked into the dark, where the Bladazirs sat. You are not ready, one said. I am, Malik replied. You are not born of our blood, said another. I bleed the same, he answered. I fight the same. I build the same. Let the right judge me. Kale stepped forward, but the matron raised a hand. Let him speak his will, she said. Let him choose his fire. A silence followed. It was not an absence of sound. It was reverence. Then the Bladazirs rose. One carried a horn carved with symbols. Another a torch dipped in black oil. The third carried nothing, his bare hands open. The rite of ash and bone, the first said. The trial of the lesser path. You walk without title, without name, without promise. If you live, you are lesser Koru. Not kin, not heir, but seen. I accept, Malik said. They stripped him of clothing, save for a simple tunic and a carved token tied around his neck. They painted him in ash, his face, chest, arms, symbols he didn't know but felt. The air was cold, but his blood ran hot. Kale did not speak to him. The matron offered no blessing. This was his alone. He was led into the forest by the Bladazirs. They carried no weapons. Neither did he. The rite is threefold, one said. Endurance. Ingenuity. Honor. He was to survive 3 days and nights in the wild. He was given no food, no tools, no water. He would be watched but not helped. If he called for aid, the rite would end, and he would never be permitted to try again. If he passed, he would return, not as one of them, but as something new. Seen. Recognized. Named. They left him at the edge of a ravine. The forest loomed around him. The trees stood like silent witnesses. Malik turned to the darkness and stepped into it. Day 1: Endurance. The cold struck first. It was not the kind of chill that simply numbed. It was invasive. Like the forest wanted to see how much he would shed before it accepted him. Malik's breath fogged the air, and his teeth began to chatter as he searched for shelter. He moved with cautious determination, scanning the terrain the way he once studied city grids, looking for lines, shapes, weaknesses. He found a narrow hollow between 2 stones, half shielded by a fallen log. It would hold heat. Maybe. He pulled branches and pine needles, stuffing the gap like insulation. He packed moss into the crevices, remembering survival documentaries, wilderness manuals, boyhood camping trips that had never lasted more than a day. As darkness fell, he curled into the nest he'd built. The forest creaked and groaned around him. His body trembled. His stomach churned with emptiness. He tried to count heartbeats, to think of warm places, to recite equations. He dreamed of elevators, of cities, of a drone that fell from the sky. He woke to the sound of something large sniffing near the shelter. He held his breath. His heart thundered. Whatever it was, a boar, a wolf, maybe worse, it eventually walked away. By morning, he couldn't feel 3 fingers on his right hand. He forced himself to move, to walk, to survive. Day 2, ingenuity. He found water in the form of a fast-moving stream. Too fast to drink safely. He remembered the filtration device he'd built for the tribe weeks ago and replicated a crude version. He used charcoal from a scorched tree, crushed it, piled it into layers of gourd halves and packed in sand. He waited. He drank. Then came food. He tracked a small animal, something like a hare, by watching where bark had been gnawed. He didn't chase. He waited. Studied. He learned its habits. He caught it on the 3rd attempt using a trap made from bent branches and vine tension. It broke its leg. He ended its life quickly. He skinned it with a jagged piece of stone, fashioned into a blade. The meat was thin, but the warmth it gave him lasted hours. He cooked it on hot stones, chewing slowly, reverently. Every bite was a victory. That night, he made tools from bone. A hook. A spike. A snare. He wasn't a hunter. He wasn't a scout. But he could learn. He always could. Day 3, honor. The marks appeared before dawn. Etchings in bark, stacks of stones in spirals, a trail of ash. He followed without hesitation. Every step was a choice. Every direction a test. At the end of the trail stood a clearing. A circle of scorched earth. A masked figure waited there, draped in red cloth and bleached bone. They held a simple staff and made no sound. The final trial, the voice said. You fight. Not to win. To show who you are. The staff was passed to Malik. He bowed. They fought. The masked warrior was relentless. Fast. Efficient. Every movement was calculated. Malik blocked, ducked, improvised. He remembered how Kale moved. How children played. He used their stances. Their leverage. The staff snapped. He didn't stop. He fought with fists, elbows, grit. Blood poured from his brow. Still, he stood. He tackled the warrior, pinning them to the dirt. His hand lifted. He could have struck. But he didn't. He stepped back. Offered a hand. The warrior took it. Honor. They vanished into the forest. Malik returned to the camp at dusk. Bikoru stood waiting. He was bloodied. Bruised. Barefoot. But standing. He walked through the fire circle. Kale watched. The matron stood. The Bladiziers stepped forward. Who speaks for this one? The eldest asked. Thomas stepped out. I do. Gasps. Laughter. But no protest. He has no name, said the Blazier. Then I give him one, Thomas said. Limewalker. Malik looked down at the boy. Then up at the tribe. They grunted. One by one. Kale nodded. The matron raised her hand. Let him be seen. Let him be lesser. Let him be Koru. That night, they painted his arms in red and gray. They gave him new clothes, simple, but marked. A cloak sewn with a single line across the shoulder. He was not a warrior. Not a leader. Not yet. But he had crossed the fire. And been reborn. Chapter 10, Fire Pit Brotherhood. Malik's name spread in whispers and sidelong glances. Limewalker. Not quite one of them, but no longer an outsider. That night, as the smoke from the right's final fire curled into the sky, he took his place near the largest fire pit, not among the elders, nor with the children, but just on the edge where warriors lounged in the aftermath of meat, fire, and adrenaline. It was there that the next test began. Not a formal trial. Not a rite. Something older. Simpler. A test of mettle, not by decree, but by instinct. They called him out not with words, but with space. The warriors shifted, making room in the ring. Not much. Just enough to challenge him to step in. He understood the language. Among them sat Breck, broader than most, with shoulders like boulders and a grin that carried more teeth than welcome. Breck had never quite forgiven Malik for putting him in the dirt weeks ago during a training match. That memory still flickered in the way Breck rolled his knuckles over his thigh, slow and deliberate. Kale watched from the shadows, her expression unreadable. The matron was nowhere to be seen. Other warriors leaned forward, sensing what was about to come. Malik sat. Said nothing. Waited. The fire crackled. Sparks rose like stars. The quiet was heavy, expectant. Breck's voice broke it. Linewalker. You've crossed your fire. But have you crossed blades? The others chuckled, low and knowing. Malik met Breck's eyes, not with arrogance, but with calm. Not with you, Malik said. Not yet. A roar of laughter followed. Breck stood. The ring widened. Boots scraped against the dirt. Weapons were laid aside. This was not a duel of honor. It was something more primal, recognition earned through bruises and blood. Malik rose slowly. He rolled his shoulders once, calmly, then stepped into the open. No weapons. Just open ground, muscle, and instinct. Breck cracked his neck. Try to stay conscious, city man. I'll do my best, Malik replied, rolling his sleeves up. Breck charged first, as expected. A shoulder slam meant to knock Malik into the dirt, fast and humiliating. Malik twisted at the last second, redirecting the momentum and sending Breck stumbling past. The crowd hooted. They circled. Breck grinned now. You're clever, he growled. But clever bleeds too. Malik said nothing. He'd learned that silence unnerved the loud. He studied Breck's stance, the flex of his shoulders, the telltale lean before each charge. Malik moved sideways, balanced on the balls of his feet. Breck lunged again. Malik ducked under the swing and drove a sharp knee into Breck's thigh. Not enough to injure, but enough to slow. Enough to tilt the fight from brute strength to strategy. The warriors leaned in now, murmuring to one another. They had seen brawlers. They had seen berserkers. This was different. Breck adjusted. His grin faded. He approached slower now, arms raised. You don't fight like a Koru, he said. You fight like you're watching me from above. I see patterns, Malik replied, circling. Your breath. Your left foot. You favor your right shoulder. You telegraph. Breck snorted. You talk like a bird. Let's see if you squawk when I break your ribs. This time, Breck faked a charge, then spun low, sweeping Malik's legs. Malik leapt, barely clearing the kick, but Breck was on him before he landed. A massive arm wrapped around Malik's waist, lifted him, slammed him to the ground. The impact rattled Malik's bones. The crowd let out a chorus of hoots and cheers. Breck loomed over him, pinning him. Stay down, Linewalker. You earned your place. No shame in that. Malik grunted, wincing as he tried to move. You think this is about place? He dug his fingers into the dirt, shifted his hips, and twisted violently. Breck lost balance for half a second. It was all Malik needed. He locked his legs around Breck's waist, rolled, and used Breck's own momentum to flip them both. Breck landed on his back. Malik mounted, one fist raised. Silence. Then Malik opened his hand. He placed it flat on Breck's chest. Not a strike. A pause. I see you, Malik said. Breck blinked up at him. Then laughed. A deep, honest laugh. Malik stepped back and offered a hand. Breck took it. He stood and slapped Malik on the back hard enough to knock the wind from him again. Linewalker, Breck said, turning to the others. He fights like a wolf thinks. Another warrior added. No. Like fire reads wind. Others nodded, grunted. Avon stepped forward. Next time we march into the Blackrock Valley, I want him beside me. The way he moves, it's like he already knows what we'll face. They began to ask Malik questions, not the kind given to a stranger, but those given to a peer. They wanted to know how he trained, how he thought, where he learned to use weakness as strength. He spoke in short answers, mixing Koru phrases with translated logic. He talked about force redirection, about rhythm and movement, about the value of retreat when others charge. They laughed, slapped backs, mimicked his moves in jest. Breck swore he would never fall for the same trick twice. Next time, I throw you into the fire pit, Breck said. Then I'll turn it into a forge, Malik replied. Roars of laughter followed. The drinking horn was passed. It did not skip Malik. By night's end, he was seated not at the edge, but in the heart of the circle. Their fire warmed him, not just the flame, but the space they made for him. He had earned not just recognition. He had earned place. Chapter 11, Ash and Bone. The morning after Malik earned his seat at the fire pit, he rose early, body sore but mind alert. Sleep had come in patches, interrupted by dreams of concrete towers, code snippets, and the eerie stillness of the forest. These dreams never ended, they blended into his waking thoughts. They weren't memories. They were blueprints. The Koru were fierce, skilled, honorable. But their ways were shaped by survival, not progress. Their weapons were reliable but inefficient. Their shelters, though sturdy, were vulnerable to the bitter rains and snows of the northern winds. Their forges produced steel, but barely. It was enough to survive. Malik wanted more than survival. He started small. A hinge. One of the forge apprentices, a boy no older than 15 named Jorah, watched as Malik bent thin strips of iron into loops and fitted them with pegs. The concept confused Jorah at first. Why make something with moving parts when a binding strap worked well enough? Because straps rot, Malik said. And wood swells. But this opens when you want, closes when you don't. He fitted the hinge to a makeshift lid for a chest that previously had no closure. The warriors gathered around, poking, lifting, murmuring. Next came the pulley. Then the sluice gate. Then the insulated clay dome Malik designed to trap heat more efficiently in the forge. The improvements came with explanations. Malik used stones, bones, and sticks to illustrate the ideas. He built models in the dirt and demonstrated results. He didn't speak like a mystic or a merchant. He spoke like a builder. Like one of them, except, more? Kale noticed first. You're changing the bones of the camp, she said one night as they walked the perimeter. We've done things the same way since the ancestors. You reshape that, you reshape everything. Is that bad? Malik asked. She didn't answer right away. Not if it makes us stronger, she said. But not everyone measures strength the same way. She wasn't wrong. The matron called for him 2 nights later. Her chamber was darker than usual. The fire was low, coals burning blue. She offered him a bowl of bitterroot tea, then sat silently as he drank. You bend time, she said finally. You see futures that others cannot. You build with them. That is a gift. And a danger. I only give tools, Malik replied. The choice to use them isn't mine. Yet they use them because you say they can. She held up a piece of iron, an improved spearhead with a hollowed groove for blood flow. This bleeds faster. Kills quicker. And the boy who made it smiled while shaping it. Malik said nothing. Every fire you light, the matron said, can burn a home or feed a people. He left her tent with the weight of her words pressing against his spine. Still he worked. Still he built. In time, a new kind of space began to form around Malik. Warriors who once ignored him now brought him raw materials. He showed one how to use counterweights to lift logs. He taught another to weave tighter nets using a 3-point loop. He made a loom from bone and vine. The weavers called it magic. Malik called it efficiency. But there were eyes that did not watch with wonder. The eldest blade seer began shadowing him. Quietly. Respectfully. But with the poise of a man preparing for something unpleasant. During a sparring match, Breck pulled him aside. "You're making enemies without drawing blood," Breck said. "That's a rare kind of threat." "I'm just helping," Malik said. Breck nodded. "You are. That's what worries them." Later that night, Malik sat alone outside his tent, sketching a wind catch design that could pull heat into shelters more efficiently. Toma approached. "Will this keep us warmer?" the boy asked. "Yes." "Will it make us weaker?" Malik looked up. "No. It will let us rest better, fight better, think better." Toma smiled. "Then it's good." Malik wished the answer were that simple. He knew the weight of change. And still, he turned to the sketch and kept drawing. Ash and bone had been the foundation. Now they could be the frame for something more. Chapter 12: Sabers in the Fog. The mist came in thick and low, creeping like a predator over the hills. By dawn, the Koru camp sat in a pale shroud of fog, the smoke of the early fires vanishing into it without trace. The air smelled wet, sharp, like stones scraped clean. Even the birds were silent. Malik woke to that silence. Not peace. Silence. The kind that preceded something violent. The kind that made his spine straighten before his mind caught up. It reminded him of boardrooms before a hostile takeover, when no one dared speak because the stakes had become lethal. But this silence was older, more primal. It belonged to forests and predators and the waiting mouths of graves. Kale stood near the watch post, unmoving. She didn't speak as he approached, just handed him a spyglass they had fashioned together weeks ago, iron-rimmed and bone-laced, something between ancient and modern. Malik took it and climbed the slope beside her, raising the glass to the tree line. The cold bit into his fingers. His breath fogged the glass. He wiped it and looked again. At first, he saw nothing. Then movement. Faint. Just beyond visibility, a shimmer in the low fog. A darker patch that shifted against the grain of the trees. Then another. Shadows within shadows. Controlled movement. "Scouts?" he asked. Kale didn't blink. "Too many." The camp stirred. Quietly. Purposefully. Not in panic, these were Koru, after all, but with the shared understanding of warriors who'd been through this dance before. Spears were gripped tighter. Arrows were checked. Rations quietly pocketed. Children moved indoors. The rhythm of preparation thrummed in their steps. Sabers. The name passed from tent to fire to spear like a ripple through water. The Saber clan were a rival tribe to the southeast, nomads with razored weapons, trained wolves, and a reputation for striking in weather like this. They were fast. Surgical. Ghost-like. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't leave signs. But Malik hadn't grown up in a place of swords and horses. He came from alleyways and asphalt. From systems and surveillance. From circuits and suspicion. He had built cybersecurity barriers and evasion tactics for billion-dollar companies. If the Sabers wanted ghosts, he would give them a labyrinth. He pulled Kale aside. "I need 10 hands. Rope. Clay. Ash. Vines. A dozen empty pots, and every sharp stick we've got." She narrowed her eyes. "For what?" "Fog favors the hidden," Malik said. "Let's become the fog." The work began at once. Malik led the construction of a false camp just inside the tree line, dyed tents hastily erected and smeared with ash-smudged footprints. They filled cooking pots with water and set smoke channels to simulate fire. Dummy figures in Koru cloaks were arranged in lifelike positions, some sitting by fires, others leaning against staves. The dummies were weighted with sacks of clay and wrapped in padded furs to fool silhouettes. From a distance, it would appear the Koru were resting. It was a lure. A deception. One built not for defense, but misdirection. Then the traps. He and Jorah, nimble and fast-thinking, dug spike pits near the most likely entry points. They covered them with moss, soil, and loose leaves, just light enough to give way under weight. Around them, they hung noise traps made from shells, bones, and bronze shards, strung between trees at knee height. They would ring like alarms when triggered. Tripwires were tied to nets hidden beneath brush, logs balanced on pulley systems, and clay kettles filled with boiling water set on rope pivots over fire pits. A single tug would release scalding heat onto anyone foolish enough to chase without caution. These traps were not elegant, but they were effective. At higher ground, Malik rigged signal horns. Hollowed wood, curved bone. One for the western ridge. One near the central path. Another above the forge. He assigned Koru warriors to each station, instructed to sound the alarm if anything crossed their line. Everything was designed not to kill outright, but to confuse, disorient, and divide. The sabers had strength and speed. Malik gave them confusion instead. By dusk, the fog thickened again. The trees disappeared into a wall of pale. No moon. No wind. Just breath and waiting. They waited. Malik sat with Kale and Breck by the command circle, sharpening a short blade he had modified with a ridged spine for breaking bone. He kept glancing to the false camp, the tension in his shoulders like pulled wire. Around them, warriors murmured softly, bracing themselves. Toma crouched beside a pile of arrows, checking fletching in tips, trying to stay calm. It was the quiet before the storm. The first horn went off just before midnight. A net snapped closed on 2 saber scouts near the west ridge. Their cries cut through the stillness, followed by the sound of a triggered tripwire. Then silence. Minutes passed. Then the second horn. The false camp had been breached. Torchlight flickered. The dummy warriors held no resistance, but the station fighters put up just enough to convince the sabers they had found the heart of the Koru. The sabers surged forward. Then Breck lit the fire traps. Tents went up in flame. Orange pillars in the mist. Warriors hidden beneath oiled tar pits sprang up like spirits, striking hard and fast. From above, Malik triggered the landslide. A controlled collapse of loose rock and timber swept down the hill, splitting the saber formation like a cleaver. Chaos erupted. Shouts in multiple dialects. Wolves barking. Horns calling. Steel clashing. Confusion. The sabers, used to controlling the field, broke formation. That's when the Koru struck. Kale led the charge, spear in one hand, axe in the other, her war cry cutting through the fog like a blade. The warriors moved with speed and discipline, herding the sabers toward the natural choke points Malik had mapped. Screams echoed. Wolves were impaled on spears, arrows flying low and fast. The scent of blood mixed with the mist. Malik moved in their wake, not like a berserker, but like a tactician. He stayed low, blade at the ready. When he fought efficiently, slashes at tendons, joints, the weak points. No wasted effort. No hesitation. One saber lunged at him. Malik ducked, rolled, and drove his blade into the attacker's thigh, then his shoulder. The man crumpled. Malik didn't look back. Jorah and a few younger warriors circled around, triggering the backup traps, driving the remaining sabers into blind alleys and echoing noise traps that made them strike at shadows. Their formation fell apart. What was once an elite raiding party now bled into the trees like scared animals. By morning it was over. The fog began to lift. The sabers were scattered. A few dead. Many fled. Their wolves howled from a distance, regrouping somewhere beyond the hills. The false camp still smoldered, but the real one stood untouched. Kale stood beside Malik at the ridge, her hands still streaked with soot and blood. "Your fog fought better than theirs," she said. "It wasn't the fog," Malik replied. "It was the ones who knew how to move through it." The warriors gathered at the fire pit later, their voices louder, faces brighter. Jorah received a carved band of honor. The others were slapped on the back, their names called in praise. Breck spoke loudest, boasting of the trap that roasted 3 wolves alive. Others joined in, embellishing, laughing. Malik sat beside Breck. No ceremony. No praise. Just a place. Kale raised a drinking horn and nodded toward him. "He doesn't just build things," she said. "He breaks their plans before they begin." The warriors raised their horns. Malik drank in silence. That night, The matron sent a single word carved into ashwood and left at his tent. Scene. Chapter 13. Bonds forged. The days after the saber raid passed in a haze of mending and rebuilding. Spears were reforged. Armor was stitched. The fire pits burned longer than usual, their smoke drifting toward the mountains like silent flags of survival. The Koru had defended their home, and won, but every victory carved something out of you. Loss didn't always wear a wound. Malik had no illusions. He knew the sabers would return, eventually. Maybe not in days. Maybe not even in moons. But they would come back smarter, angrier. And when they did, the Koru would need to be more than just strong. They would need to be united. They would need to trust each other, not just bleed together. And that meant Malik needed allies, not just friendly nods or shared meals. Real allies. People who would vouch for him, stand with him, not because they were told to, but because they chose to. He had to. Kale, the warrior who'd pulled him from bloodied snow and judged him silently for weeks after. And Toma, the orphan who watched everything, said little and asked questions that made Malik pause. Kale was fire. She didn't speak unless it mattered. She moved like a predator even when relaxed, her scars unreadable, her strength contained. Most warriors kept a distance from her. Not out of fear, but reverence. She'd fought through more winters than many had survived, and she'd led more raids than she could remember. She was as much legend as woman. And when Malik stood beside her, he felt the weight of that legacy. Malik admired her. Feared her, too. But mostly, he respected her mind, the way she sized up problems like terrain. The way she listened, then acted. Kale never wasted energy. Not in combat, not in conversation. She didn't flinch from truth. They spent time at the edge of the woods, testing weapons and strategies. She'd show him old Koru formations, and he'd suggest alternatives based on terrain manipulation and pressure angles. At first, she dismissed him. Then she started adapting. Not many men corrected Kale. Fewer survived it. But Malik didn't do it to prove himself. He did it because he wanted her to win. To live. "You think like a cornered beast," she told him one afternoon, after he'd bested her in a mock ambush with a trap rigged from vine tension and a falling branch. "I've been cornered before," he said. "And I'm still here." Kale grunted. Then smiled. Not wide. Just enough to matter. They began training together more often. Sometimes in front of others. Sometimes just the two of them, out past the outer ring of torches. They didn't speak of the future. They didn't speak of the past. But there was something unspoken between them, a rhythm. Two blades sharpening each other. Toma was a different kind of ally. Where Kale taught Malik the rhythm of war, Toma gave him the pulse of the tribe. The laughter, the folklore, the daily wisdoms passed between stone carvers and fire watchers. The things no elder ever bothered to say aloud. Toma was small for his age, with quick hands and restless eyes. He'd lost his family to fever seasons ago. Since then, he'd been raised by the forge keepers, fed by the council, and ignored by most. But Malik saw in him what the Koru often missed: curiosity. An unrelenting hunger to know why things worked the way they did. Toma asked why the stars moved. Why wolves didn't build. Why Malik's skin didn't burn in the forge like the others. Malik tried to explain thermodynamics. Toma blinked, then asked if wind had a skeleton. Malik laughed. Then he tried again, slower. They built things together. Simple toys at first, wooden figures with spinning arms powered by tension bands. Then slings, wind catchers, even a rough compass made from a lodestone and bark. The boy's hands were quick, and his eyes faster. "He's got gears in his bones," Malik told Kale. Kale nodded. "He'll need armor for what that brings." The three of them, Malik, Kale, and Toma, formed a strange triangle in the camp. Not family. Not rank. But orbit. Each revolved around the others, sometimes close, sometimes silent, but always aware. One night, after drills, they sat by the outer fire. It was late, and the stars were high. They shared bread, fish, and a boiled root that Kale claimed kept the blood strong. Toma was carving a piece of softwood into the shape of a hawk. Malik leaned back against a log. You ever think about leaving? He asked Kale. She didn't answer immediately. This place is my blood, she said. But if it turned against me? Yes. Toma looked up. What about you? I've already left everything behind, Malik said. The question is what I'm building now. Toma looked thoughtful. If we all die, who remembers us? Kale stared into the fire. The ones who survive. Malik picked up a stick and drew 3 lines in the dirt. Or the ones we teach. Toma looked at the lines. Then I'll remember both of you. Silence stretched between them. The kind that wasn't heavy. The kind that felt like home. Kale's eyes flicked to Malik. Softened, just a breath. She passed him a water skin. He drank, then handed it to Toma. They sat like that for a long time. From that night forward, they began to feel like something more than warriors and outcasts. They became something the Koru had long respected more than strength. They became a unit. Not a family. But close. A pack. A crew. A small, hard core of trust forged not in blood, but in fire, in questions, in shared silence. And the Koru noticed. Some whispered. Some nodded. A few scowled. But no one interfered. Because in the days to come, when fire would again threaten their gates, and steel would test their unity, this bond would matter more than walls or weapons. Chapter 14. Old Gods, New Fire. The morning sky churned with restless clouds. They slid across the mountains like slow creatures, thick with omens. A chill wind brushed over the Koru camp, stirring the tarps and whispering through bone chimes. The camp moved differently that day, fewer voices, more eyes on the wind. Conversation stalled mid-sentence. Laughter was absent. The old ones lit incense long before the sun reached its height. Smoke curled in thin, nervous lines thick with herbs Malik didn't recognize. Even the children walked with quieter steps, clutching each other's hands. Something had shifted. Malik felt it in the stillness that clung to his skin. In the way Kale studied him before walking off to the forge. In the way Toma wouldn't meet his gaze, as if looking at him directly risked seeing something he wasn't meant to understand. There was a tension in the air like a held breath. By midday, he was summoned. Not asked? Summoned. 2 warriors he didn't know, painted in ceremonial ash and ochre, appeared at his tent. One carried a staff carved with spiral glyphs, the other a curved blade not meant for war. Neither spoke. They simply gestured. Malik stood, heart steady, though he wasn't sure why. He followed. They led him out of the camp, past the training circles, past the fire pits, past the ancestor stones. The usual sounds of the camp, hammer on anvil, warriors sparring, dogs barking, faded with each step. The forest thickened around them. Roots curled like knuckles from the soil. The air cooled and grew damp, carrying the scent of old water and older soil. He felt watched, not by warriors, but by the land itself. After an hour's silent march, they reached a stone gate draped in woven vines and bone charms. The warriors stopped and stepped aside. Malik moved forward alone. Beyond the gate, a clearing opened into an ancient circle of standing stones. Each was etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with red pigment. There were markings older than Koru's script. Older than speech. Patterns that twisted if you stared too long. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning struck. The spiritual council waited inside. 6 figures in heavy cloaks. Hoods drawn. Faces carved with age and mystery. Skin painted with ash in a language of symbols Malik couldn't begin to read. And at their center, the matron. Her presence filled the space without sound. Her staff rested across her knees, carved from black wood and etched with veins of silver. Malik stepped into the ring. The air thickened. Even the wind paused. The eldest among them spoke first. A voice like rusted metal. You do not walk in the footsteps of the old ways. Another, hunched but with a voice like stone grinding, added. You build without worship. You shape without prayer. You bend fire. A third hissed, like one who stole it from the gods. The matron's voice broke through. Calm. Certain. He is not from here. Malik's spine stiffened. Not just a stranger. She continued. Not just an outlander. Something. Further. They circled him slowly now. Each one reached forward to place a mark on his skin, paint, ash, and something colder. A powder that stung. One held a smooth, black stone to his chest. It hummed faintly, like a low harmonic note. You fell from the sky. One whispered. You dream of steel and light. Malik's voice stayed even. I don't know how I got here. Only that I woke up bleeding in the snow. They began to chant. Low. Layered. The words didn't make sense, but the rhythm did. It pulsed through the ground and into his bones. The stones around them responded, faint vibrations under his feet. His vision blurred. He felt warmth in his spine, and a strange brightness behind his eyes. The symbols on the stones shifted, subtly at first. Then they twisted, blooming into familiar shapes, circuitry, algorithms, fractal structures. Echoes of schematics he had once drawn on glass boards in climate-controlled offices. Things from his world. From his life before. When the chanting stopped, the matron stepped forward. You bring a new fire, she said. It does not belong to us. But it is in your blood now. Another voice, closer than he expected, murmured, New fire burns old gods. Malik met the matron's eyes. What do you want from me? She didn't answer immediately. She looked skyward. Her eyes reflected starlight. To choose what must be burned, and what must remain. They left him in the stone circle until nightfall. No food. No words. No shadow but his own. Alone. The sky above turned from storm gray to obsidian. The stars blinked down like silent judges. The wind returned cool and sharp. Malik sat on the cold stone, heart heavy. Not of this world. He had always felt that way, back in the boardrooms, behind the screens, even when he was winning. But here, it wasn't just metaphor. It was truth. And now that truth had weight. Visions swam behind his closed eyes, cities of steel, rivers of data, towers humming with energy. All gone. Replaced by firelight and bones, by symbols carved into trees, and warriors who spoke through their silence. When the warriors returned to collect him, they didn't speak. But they bowed. Not low. But enough. A new kind of respect. Or fear. Or both. Malik didn't ask. He only walked back with them, carrying fire in his chest, and the gaze of gods on his back. Chapter 15. The Hammer and the Mind. It began with a broken sword. Not shattered in battle, nor lost age, but fractured clean across the grain after a single strike. Breck brought it to Malik, eyes narrowed, voice tight with frustration. This was my grandfather's blade, he growled. Passed down 3 hands? One fight, one, and it snapped like river ice. Malik held the sword delicately. The break was too clean. The core too brittle. He turned it over, running a thumb along the line of fracture. The grain structure was wrong, layered poorly, too brittle at the core, too soft on the edges. A blade that looked strong, but was built to fail under real pressure. You've been folding your metal wrong, he said calmly. Breck bristled. We've done it the same way for generations. And generations have been wrong. The words were blunt. The silence that followed, heavier still. Kale, standing just outside the circle, tensed. But Malik didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled a burnt piece of wood from the forge and drew into the dirt. He sketched a blade, not just its shape, but its layers. Cross sections. Core density. The difference between hardened edge and flexible spine. We don't need thicker swords, he said. We need smarter ones. Stronger in the spine. Sharper on the edge. Made with care, not just fire. Fire gives it shape, but the mind gives it purpose. Breck scowled. You speak like a spirit maker, not a smith. Malik shrugged. Steel listens to the mind as much as the hammer. If you strike without thinking, you just make noise. That evening, Kale gathered the other forgers and warriors. They met in a half-moon circle by the forge, each with an old blade in their lap or strapped to their back. The firelight flickered across their faces, smoke trailing upward as though it too waited to hear. Malik stood in the center, holding one of the Koru's traditional swords. This works, he said, lifting it. But it can be better, he explained, tempering. Quenching. Carbon density. He used metaphors they would understand. A sword is like a warrior. Too hard, it breaks. Too soft, it bends. The mind is the spine. The will is the edge. If you craft both right, it won't fail. He showed them samples, small test blades he'd forged with varying temperatures and cooling times. He passed them around, one by one. They flexed. They struck wood. They did not bend. They did not break. Then he held up a new kind of blade, a layered one. Thinner than the Koru's standard weapons, but more balanced. Sharper. With a fuller line that ran like a wave through its center. He introduced the idea of layered steel. Folding not for tradition, but for strength. Each layer traps the failures of the last, he said. But together they become whole. He spoke of memory, how metal remembered its treatment, how heat and cold shaped more than its form. He demonstrated using clay-soaked reeds to judge temperature, and showed them how a different quenching oil yielded a tougher, less brittle edge. Kale was the first to nod. Breck, after a long silence, gave a grunt that sounded like reluctant approval. Toma, who had been watching from the shadows, lit up with questions, asking about airflow, blade curvature, the balance point. Some rolled their eyes. But more leaned forward. Over the next week, Malik led a new forging ritual. Still fire, still sweat, but different. Measured. Intentional. They tracked temperatures using reed bundles and wax indicators. They timed their strikes. They cooled their blades in mixtures of oil and herbs designed to reduce cracking. Some warriors balked at the changes. Others embraced them with cautious hope. They failed. Blades cracked. Warped. Sometimes exploded in the coals. Malik kept every failure, lined them on a shelf by the forge, naming them. Impatient, too cold, too thin. He taught through the mistakes. Then one didn't fail. Kale swung it against a log. The blade bit deep, clean, smooth, effortless. This, she said, holding it high, is a sword that remembers the hand that made it. The others cheered. Even Breck let out a howl. A new rhythm took over the forge, one not just of hammering, but thinking. Listening. Adjusting. They began to compete, not for strength, but for precision. Warriors challenged one another to duels using the new blades, testing edge against edge. For the first time in memory, the forge became a place of learning, not just labor. Toma began drawing blade schematics in the dirt, combining ideas Malik had shared with the dreams of his own. What if, he asked one night, we made a blade that could cut through stone? Malik smiled. Then we'd need a fire that eats the mountain. By the time the new forge would rise, Malik had already planted the seeds. Not just in fire, but in minds. The tribe was changing, one blade at a time. Chapter 16, The First Forge. The decision came not with drums or firelight, but with a quiet nod across a clay map. Kale, arms folded, watched as Malik traced a circle in the dirt with the edge of a charred stick. Around it he drew lines, a channel for air, a break for drainage, a path to the heart of it all, heat. A foundry? She asked. A forge, he corrected. But not like the one you know. This one breathes. It feeds on wind and fire like a beast. And when it wakes up, it changes everything. The Koru's old forge was little more than a heated pit with bellows and sweat. It worked, but it wasted fuel, cracked metal, and depended too heavily on mood and weather. Malik had studied better, remembered more. He had built in clean rooms and on rooftops, in war zones and labs. He had the knowledge of alloys, airflows, and heat ratios burned into his muscles. He didn't invent what came next, but he adapted it, reimagined it for mud, ash, and tribal hands. And what he built would begin to remake not just steel, but society itself. Hashtag the birth of a new flame. It started with clay. Not just any clay, high iron clay they dug from the riverbeds under moonlight. Toma helped, his feet stained red, hands blistered but eager. Malik explained insulation and conductivity, breaking it down in metaphor. Toma listened like the earth was telling secrets through Malik's voice. They built molds. Cylinder walls 2 hands thick. Vents shaped from bone and packed with gravel. Malik showed them how to bury the base deep into the ground to hold heat longer. Around it, they packed stone and charcoal, layering it in ways the Koru had never considered. Malik taught them how airflow could change everything, how a whisper of wind could become a roar. He constructed a small prototype first, barely larger than a cauldron. But it worked. Breck helped drag logs for the shelter frame. Kale built the scaffold with arms like braided rope. Others joined, curious at first, then committed. They didn't understand every step, but they understood purpose. And where purpose goes, people follow. And slowly, something new took shape. A foundry. The Koru called it. The beast in the earth. It roared for the first time when Malik lit the core flame and fed it air through a pipe sealed in waxed leather and wound with clay. The fire didn't just burn, it inhaled. The heat changed. It became more intense, more focused. Metal didn't just bend, it melted. The tribe watched in awe as Malik poured into his first mold. A blade. Nothing fancy. A simple knife with a fuller line, shaped like a wave. The sound it made when struck rang clear and true. Kale lifted it. Turned it. Tested the balance. "What is it made from?" she asked. "The same iron, but refined." The heat changed its nature. "Like the fire did to you," Toma said quietly. Malik didn't answer. But his silence said enough. Hashtag a camp transformed. Weeks passed. The forge transformed the camp. Spears grew lighter, faster. Armor became layered rather than solid, more flexible, less fatiguing. The hunters moved more efficiently. The scouts lasted longer in the cold. Wheelbarrows and pulleys began to appear. At first mocked, then adopted. Malik introduced smoke tunnels that redirected toxic fumes away from workstations, allowing longer forge hours. He built water traps that kept drinking supplies uncontaminated and taught them how to store surplus grain in sealed clay vaults. He drew plans for double-layered roofing structures to trap heat in the winter and vent smoke upward without flooding the interior. The shelters improved. Sleeping became easier. Spirits lifted. He even assembled a primitive pressure valve he called a steam heart. It didn't work flawlessly, but it boiled water and spun a crude shaft that drove a grinding stone. Kale stood back, arms crossed, watching it spin. "You're making fire do work," she muttered. Malik just smiled. They built a second kiln nearby. Then a third. Warriors began speaking of steel like it was something sacred. Toma etched diagrams into clay tablets. Schematics Malik gently corrected and praised. Kale's blade was reworked twice, not because it broke, but because each iteration was better. Sleeker. Deadlier. Even the children began mimicking Malik's sketches in the dirt, drawing simplified forges and talking about beast heat. Soon, the forge wasn't just a tool. It was a heartbeat. The camp pulsed with new rhythms, sharper, faster, stronger. Wariness began to give way to quiet confidence. The old ways didn't vanish. They evolved. Some elders watched with pride. Others with quiet unease. Malik saw it in their eyes, the fear of change, the fear of forgetting. They whispered to the matron. They met at night. But none stopped him. Not yet. There was momentum now, like a boulder tipping forward, too heavy to catch, too fast to control. One night, the matron stood at the mouth of the forge. The flames crackled behind her like a beast in its den. She placed a single black rock on the entrance stone. Every fire you feed can light a path, she said, her voice low, or burn it away. Malik nodded. And sometimes it must do both. She didn't smile. She just walked into the smoke and vanished. Hashtag a new era begins. The first forge wasn't just a forge. It was an answer to fear. A symbol that the Korun no longer bent to the world, they could shape it. Sculpt it. Alter it. Challenge it. For centuries they had endured. Now they could design. Now they could choose. New tools led to new questions. What if they could build larger shelters? Could they redirect rivers? Could they raise defenses not from stone, but from ideas? Could they fight smarter wars, or maybe prevent them altogether? Thomas started dreaming in diagrams. Sometimes he would wake Malik in the night with charcoal-smeared fingers and wide eyes, dragging him to see something he'd etched onto bark or stone. Sometimes it was nonsense. Sometimes it was genius. Kale began to spar less and plan more. She spent hours watching the forge, noting which blades cut deeper, which armor deflected better. She stopped asking what Malik was building, and instead began asking what they could build next. And Malik, once the outcast, stood not at the edge of their world, but in its firelit center. He knew the dangers of technology. He had seen cities eat themselves with it. But here, with caution and care, it could be something else. A future worth building. A world born not just from blood, but from the forge. The first fire had been tamed. The next would be shared.